Good morning and welcome to Early Exchange with Blessing Ache, Femi Ayodele, Sam Oruoje, and Idahosa Osamanze.
Is a critical element of managing the employee-employer relationship, particularly from...
The problem in Nigeria is not corruption, and everybody seems to be very surprised that corruption is not a problem.
How can indigenous languages be promoted in a country like this?
Statistics show that less than 10% of Nigeria, the population of Nigeria, has have access to health insurance. You imagine if our population is about 200 million and...
This is Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
A beautiful morning to you. Welcome to Early Exchange, where it is all about business, economy, and development as we bring to you front burner issues as they affect these areas. We don't just talk about the challenges, we also highlight the opportunities, opening your eyes to them and providing you deep insight on how to go about them. I am Blessing H. Welcome to today's edition. I'm not here alone. Chooks John Rogers is also in the studio today, and from the way he looks, it promises to be a wild show. Good morning, Chooks.
Good morning, Blessing, and it's always nice sitting next to you.
Okay.
Welcome, viewers. Good morning.
I can blush with that. At least I'm allowed to do that. All right, setting the pace will be morning news updates, which will bring you up to speed on current happenings since yesterday. And Joy Adisua Eremusele is waiting to make you catch up on that. Let's get over now to where Jerry is.
Good morning and welcome to the morning news update right here on Souk News, your home for major developmental news and beyond. I'm Joy Adesua Iramoseli. In the news today, President Tinubu secures multi-billion-dollar funding from IDB for Nigerian infrastructure projects. Fiscal Responsibility Commission calls for proper debt restructuring and spending limits. Niger Delta Power Holding Company committed to advancing the Light Up Nigeria project. And on the foreign scene, UAE to invest $950 million in engineering facility at Dubai World Central. Amazon forms partnership with Snapchat for direct purchases. We'll take a breather, and when we return, we'll give you the news in full. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. President Ahmed Tinubu has successfully secured a multi-million-dollar funding package from the Islamic Developmental Bank to support various infrastructure projects in Nigeria. This funding, which was announced after discussions between President Tinubu and the Vice President of the IDB, Dr. Mansour Muhtar, in Saudi Arabia, will be allocated to federal and sub-national infrastructure initiatives. President Tinubu expressed his belief that Nigeria will serve as a beacon of hope for Africa and that the country's investments will yield high returns, benefiting both the youth and the world at large. He highlighted key areas of focus, including port infrastructure, power infrastructure, and agro-allied facilities, which are crucial for achieving sustainable food security. The Vice President of the IDB, Dr. Mansour Muhtar, while responding, stated that Nigeria's economy has caught the attention of the financial world and will receive a significant share of the bank's investment for the African continent. In a bid to reduce the proportion of retained revenue allocated to debt service, the Nigerian Fiscal Responsibility Commission has advised the federal government to take action on restructuring its debt and control expenditures by ministries, departments, and agencies. The Commission suggests exploring state contingent debt instruments such as revenue bonds and payments tied to oil prices, while repayment obligations are linked to the ability to repay. While calling for the implementation and amendment to the Fiscal Responsibility Act 2007 at the national and sub-national level, the Commission believes these amendments will align the cap on expenditures of departments with the Finance Act, establish penalties for violations of Act, and enhance the planning and accountability by scheduled corporation. Additionally, there is a recommendation to privatize more public assets and pursue public-private partnership models in infrastructure projects in order to lessen the need for new sovereign borrowing. The Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security has officially opened a housing estate for its staff in Abuja. Spread across 3.6 hectares, the estate includes 52 housing units and varying sizes and features a staff clinic, school, fire station, and a recreational facility. The project aims to provide affordable and decent accommodation for the ministry's employees, enhance their well-being, and improve their productivity. The housing estate, located in Abuja's Kabusa area, was inaugurated by Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security, Dr. Ernest Umakihe, while acknowledging the challenges faced by the staff in finding suitable housing due to rising real estate costs and limited affordable options. He expressed the ministry's commitment to prioritizing this initiative and working with reputable organizations to successfully implement the housing project. Away from that, the Niger Delta Power Holding Company, NDPHC, says it remains dedicated to pushing forward with the Light Up Nigeria project, even in the face of considerable debt of 180 billion naira. The project has already commenced with the Ibadan Electricity Distribution Company, focusing on supplying electricity to the Ota industrial clusters, and several other projects are underway with other distribution companies. The debt profile, which includes debt owed by entities such as the Nigerian Bulk Electricity Trading Company, NBET, and the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, will not deter the company from pursuing the goal of providing stable and sustainable electricity to the nation. Additionally, the sale of 10 integrated power plants has been put on hold due to the owner's indecision regarding the sale, as the NDPHC is only acting as caretakers and will act in accordance with the decision made by the federal government and state governments. Moving on, the Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution, IPCR, is set to commence a 2-week intensive training program for 20 Nigerians on negotiation and mediation. The Director General of the Institute, Mr. Joseph Ochogu, stressed the importance of equipping participants with the necessary skills to become agents of change in their families, communities, and beyond. The diverse range of participants include civil servants, politicians, legal practitioners, academics, and entrepreneurs were encouraged to apply their newly acquired knowledge and skills to promote peace and reduce violence. Ochogu acknowledged the turbulent nature of the world we live in and highlighted the relevance of the training in managing various crises, both domestically and globally. The Institute expressed its commitment to supporting participants in their individual projects and aspirations to foster peace in Nigeria, West Africa, and the world. The Vice President, Femi Wash Media Limited, Idahosa Osamanze, has criticized the excessive emphasis on certificates by institutions and corporations in Nigeria, urging a shift towards prioritizing competence and capacity. He highlighted the global trend in valuing performance over certification and called for a renewed focus on technical and vocational training to meet industry demands. Expressing concern over university neglecting practical skills, it stressed the need for the government to address educational issues, including taking legal action against parents who refuse to send their children to school. Dr. Osamanze, however, commended Lagos State for its initiatives on free education and stressed the importance of skills acquisition, expressing dismay over the decline in apprenticeship. He disapproved of the system that rewards laziness and called for the recognition of hard work rather than solely relying on credentials, with a shift towards embracing new technology. We'll take a breather, and when we return, we'll bring you more news. Stay with us. Welcome back, and you're still on the morning news update on Souk News. Remember to follow and engage on all various social media platforms. Away from Nigeria, since the July coup and subsequent suspension from the regional financial market, the Republic of Niger has failed to make payment of $304 million in interest in capital. In addition, the country has recently missed another interest payment of approximately $4 million on its debt. This situation is occurring while Niger faces sanctions imposed by the Conference of Heads of State and Government of the West African Economic and Monetary Union, leading to its suspension from the regional financial market and the regional central bank. As a consequence of the military coup that removed President Mohamed Bazoum in July, Niger has faced severe economic and financial sanctions from ECOWAS and the West African Monetary Union. The current payment incident and ongoing financial challenges add to the difficulties faced by Niger due to its political situation. South Africa has witnessed a sharp decline in the unemployment levels, surpassed pre-COVID level in the third quarter of this year. Concurrently, the official unemployment rate experienced a slight decline from 32.6% to 31.9% in the second quarter, though it remains among the highest in the world. According to reports, the July to September quarter marked the 8th consecutive increase in employment, indicating an ongoing recovery in the labor market following the impact of the pandemic. Job gains were particularly notable in the finance, community, and social services and agricultural sector. However, the mining and manufacturing industries continue to face challenges, with both experiencing further job losses in the third quarter, shedding 35,000 and 50,000 jobs respectively. And we move on to the Middle East. Emirates, the world's largest international airline, is set to invest $950 million to construct a state-of-the-art engineering facility at Dubai World Central. Covering an expansive area of 1 million square meters, this facility will be the largest and most advanced of its kind in the airline industry. Not only will it support Emirates' aircraft fleet and operational needs until the 2040s, it will also serve as a center of excellence for commercial aviation engineering services in the Middle East, with the plan to offer spare capacity to other airline operators. According to reports, Phase 1 of the project is set to begin in 2024 and conclude in 2027, and will include 8 maintenance hangars, 1 paint hangar, workshops, storage facilities, among other essential components. While thinking of how to sustain the project, special provisions for green building materials, solar panels across the campus, and recycling systems for wastewater and oils are on the pipeline. The existing Emirates Engineering Center at Dubai International will continue its operations, while the new facility at DWC will initially handle overflow work and lengthy maintenance programs. Amazon has announced a new partnership with Snapchat that allows users in the US to make direct purchases from the e-commerce giant through the social media app. Similar to a deal recently made with Meta platform, customers can shop directly from Amazon's Snapchat ads and complete their purchase without leaving the app. This new experience also provides real-time pricing, delivery estimates, and product details for selected Amazon ads on Snapchat. The collaboration comes as Amazon seeks to expand its product offering through social media platforms, and it's seen as a boost for Snapchat, which has recently reported strong revenue and user growth. Ahead of the upcoming OPEC Plus oil ministers meeting, Russia's seaborne crude shipments have experienced a slight decrease, falling below the level pledged by Moscow. According to tanker tracking data monitored, approximately 3.2 million barrels per day of crude were shipped from the Russian port in the week leading up to November 12. Although this figure was down by 40,000 barrels per day compared to the previous week, it still remained 700,000 barrels per day higher than the level observed in August. Following a surge in exports during October, Russia has adjusted its seaborne crude shipment ahead of the OPEC Plus meeting. And finally, the recent partnership between the U.S. and Sri Lanka to support Indian billionaire Gautam Adani's port terminal project has been described as a challenge to China's trade infrastructure. While some Western analysts express concerns about potential military implications of China's maritime network, the $553 million loan package provided by the International Development Finance Corps for Adani's Western container terminal in Colombo not only strengthens the strategic ties between India and the U.S., but also revitalizes Adani's international ventures. This comes after Adani's previous decision to withdraw from Myanmar following the 2021 coup, showcasing its commitment to responsible business practices. And with that, we call it a wrap on the morning news update. Stay tuned for more analysis on Early Exchange. And remember to follow and engage with us on all various social platforms. I'm Joy Adesua Eramosele. Many thanks for watching.
Good morning and welcome to Early Exchange with Blessing Ache, Femi Ayodele, Sam Oruoje, and Idahosa Osamanze.
Is a critical element of managing the employee-employer relationship, particularly from...
The problem in Nigeria is not corruption. And everybody seems to be very surprised that corruption is not a problem.
How can indigenous languages be promoted in a country like this?
Statistics show that less than 10% of Nigeria, the population of Nigeria, has, have access to health insurance. You imagine if our population is about 200 million and...
This is Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
I wish I can actually tell you what my laughter is about. Okay, let me give you just a little info on that. Before we came back on air, Idahosa Osamanze and Chooks Rogers were having a little bit of banter over that montage that you just watched, where Idahosa was saying corruption is not Nigeria's problem. And Chooks' position was, what is our problem? It has to be corruption. And Idahosa said something that he had said earlier. I think that should be Thursday or Friday, when he said corruption is in the DNA of some people. And it was quite funny how he said that and how he's reiterating that. So I think he can tell us a bit of that before we go into news analysis today. You already know that Idahosa Osamanze is, if you've been watching the show, is Director, Research and Policy, African Development Studies Center, and also in-house analyst at Sook News. Good morning, sir. Welcome to the show. I had to bring you in that, because it was quite funny, the banter.
I think it's just the fact that sometimes there's a problem with meaning. And when you're defining words and you are not putting it, aligning it with the worldview of the people, you're likely to get a very wrong perception of the things that you're talking about. And I think this is a problem. We need to define what corruption means in our worldview as against the Western worldview.
Okay, I leave it there. I do not want to encourage further the banter. All right, a lot of stories have been read this morning. Thank you, Joy, for bringing us up to date on current happenings. Yes, one of the stories read in the news this morning is that of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu securing a multi-billion-dollar funding package from the Islamic Development Bank, IDB, to support various infrastructure projects in Nigeria. Now, this funding will go into federal and sub-national infrastructure initiatives. The president also expressed his belief that Nigeria will serve as a beacon of hope for Africa. And the highlighted key areas of focus includes port infrastructure, power infrastructure, and agro-allied facilities, which, according to the president, are crucial for achieving sustainable food security. At this point, I feel like applauding the president for securing this funding for infrastructure projects, and the three key areas that will be the focus of this funding are quite key and really, really timely. Idahosa.
Yeah, the president deserves a lot of applause as the #1 salesperson for the country, and this is the third important official meeting of a president outside of Nigeria, and every one of these meetings ended up with some deal on behalf of the country. So it's to tell us that the president is determined that his effort to see how to bridge the infrastructure gap in the nation is working. And secondly, to also see the fact that he also do not want to encourage too much of borrowing, but to see how we can encourage public-private partnership in the development of basic infrastructure in Nigeria. This is quite heartwarming, and especially looking at the area also where this funding is also being channeled toward, especially the development of port facility. And you can imagine that we can build a new and a modern port somewhere around the Benue, Niger River, Niger axis,
And that, of course, will be able to serve the northern and the eastern part, and then decongesting the Apapa port and reducing the plenty of pressure in Lagos. So what this will mean for Nigeria is a spatial distribution become real critical, because once you create economy in these other hubs, a lot of people would not want to shift to Lagos. People will want to shift to this side. Then you drag the population in Lagos down, and then, of course, pressure on the infrastructure in Lagos is also reduced. And this will help spread development. I think, for me, it's a very welcome development. IDB had been funding a lot of projects in the Middle East, and I think extending that hand of fellowship to Africa is something that we really need to also commend. Don't forget that even the last administration also had to draw on the Sukuk Fund to fix some major roads in Nigeria. Of course, again, Islam is doing a whole lot in terms of funding state infrastructure. Kudos to the president, and we do hope that this thing will kick up in good time, at least to ease pressure on the social condition of Nigeria at the moment.
All right, Chicks.
Can we look at the end, the tip part of this particular funding? Okay. So can I get a basis, sir? Is this a loan or a partnership?
It's partnership. President doesn't want a loan, he wants partnership.
Good. And we know that the Islamic Development Bank, when they make an offer, they follow through.
Yes.
And most of their loans, if it's not a loan, they don't do percentage kind of things. They don't tell you that you pay us this because we are giving you this. Good.
Yeah, but because Islamic banking does not actually take profit, or not profit, interest. Okay, interest, yes. Yes, interest is a haram in Islam. It's not permissible. Islam does not allow its practitioners to give out loan and expect interest, because interest is a fixed rate. Now, what is actually encouraged in Islamic tradition is the fact that if you give out a loan, then of course you can make profit, and then there'll be sharing between the people who are putting the fund, and then, of course, where these things are coming from. But I think really why these loans are this partnership is coming, and then Nigeria must also put in place a very secured measure to ensure that this fund are refunded back to the owner, and then, of course, they can also make some profit on this facility. This, of course, will encourage more business to be done together at that level.
Before we talk about refund, sorry, Blessing, can we look at the projects that this particular funding is going to go into and tell ourselves that in 2 weeks or in 2 months or in 3 years, this particular project will be completed, and we know that these are the people handling this and who should hold responsible if after the end of this duration, this monies and this project is not complete?
I don't have a doubt that the president is in a hurry to get a whole lot of things done, and he has given himself the target of 2026 to ensure that basic things that Nigerians will need to see move forward are done. And that was why he kept reiterating at the recently concluded retreat of all the ministers and said, we are here to serve Nigeria. Nigeria is in a hurry to see things work. And I remember the day, the Monday after that retreat, Festus Keyamo was with his PAMSEX and the Director General in the Aviation Ministry, and he said to them, well, I don't want to lose my job, so I wouldn't mind sacking you, because the president said if I don't perform, I will lose my job, so I want to keep my job, so you must also have to keep your job. You see, this is what leadership is all about, and once the tone is clear from on top, and this is what the leader wants, those who are supposed to implement, take it off from them. So I am very determined that these things are time-bound, and like in the Arab region, they also believe in timeliness of project, that you put a time frame to which this should be done, so that a whole lot of inflations, of course, will not affect the funding, and then, of course, make the project non-deliverable. So I'm hopeful that the money is there. I was saying to somebody yesterday, you can imagine Saudi Aramco alone in 2022 made a profit of over $160 billion US. And that is enough funding for Saudi. So if they give us some $3 billion US, it can go a long way in really giving us some critical infrastructure that will drive the engine of growth for us as a nation.
Yes, and I was going to ask Chooks earlier what you find different in this funding and what it is proposed to achieve from what we find in the past. Now, what I find different here is that in the past, when funds like this are secured, what is channeled into seems to be ambiguous. We're just told for infrastructure development, and there is no clear-cut plan, or you don't see the areas that they are actually going to. But what I like about this is that 3 key areas have been identified. There is port infrastructure, there is power infrastructure, and there is agro-allied facilities. You were asking who to hold responsible. For port infrastructure, you have the NPE. So if money is being channeled into that, so already you know the agency that would be held responsible. I like
the Minister of Blue Economy. That should be Oyetola. We know who
who
to drag.
There's a ministry. If it's power infrastructure, of course, there is the Minister of Power. And if it's agro-allied facilities, there's Ministry of Agriculture. Yeah. So it's clear to know who will be in charge of all of this. And I like that from the very beginning, it is well decided. And these are ventures, or these are sectors that will bring back the money. All like what we see, they're put into road rehabilitation that take a very long time to complete, and in some cases they're never completed. And so you're beginning to wonder, when monies are collected like this, or when funds are released, they're being channeled into road rehabilitation. You're asking, what is the plan for recouping back this fund? But if it's put into port infrastructure, it then means that more revenue will be generated from that. If it's put into power infrastructure, it will encourage production, raising our GDP, and companies will be in better position to pay taxes to government gains. You're better able to recoup the money. If it's put into agro-allied facilities, of course, it's like a businessman taking a loan from a bank, and he already has a clear-cut plan of how he's going to utilize the plan. Now, talking about timeliness, if this could come in before the money has been received, I have no doubt that there are well-laid plans as to when everything will come together, and it just looks beautiful that Nigeria is becoming an investment hub in Africa. Because
there's a caveat.
Okay.
And this caveat is that the public servants, okay, especially the civil servants, okay, who will supervise these projects should not be sellout. And I'm really advocating to see if the National Assembly could actually make a law that if the SLA of any contract fail, the Director General or the agency, the director who supervises that job, and sign it out as done, whether still in service or out of service, should actually be criminally prosecuted. And this will serve as a deterrence to others who will want to compromise the integrity of the delivery of contracts awarded. You see, because most of the time we see contract fail, and then of course the civil servants themselves are afraid, they just walk away, whether it's out of service now. And then the contractor, you drag them here and there and they say, oh, something happened. You see, because if the civil servants are held accountable and responsible for the failure of contracts, the contractors will behave. But as it is now, there seems to be obvious collusion between the civil servants and contractors. And that is why you see that the integrity of contracts that are done in Nigeria are below standard. Because if somebody certifies that this job is done, and there is a certain level of standard agreement that has entered into the contractor, that this road is supposed to be 5 inches and somebody is doing 3 inches, and then somebody pass it out as done, that's a criminal offense, and they should be prosecuted. Now, once these laws are put in place, you will see a whole lot of things will start to fall in places. Because the real problem is only the conception of idea. The problem we have always had is the problem of implementation. And because nobody is held responsible, or nobody is accountable for the failure, we just allow things to fly. So we see a whole lot of things and contracts that are awarded that are never, ever completed. Some of the roads are never gazetted because the SLA are not met. And yet there are many people in the Ministry of Works who are certifying this job, and they are making payments from government to go into the hands of the contractor without job being done. And I think we must be very serious to see that when projects are conceived, people must be held responsible, not just the minister, but those who are the foot soldier on the field, ensuring that this thing is done, that they actually held accountable.
Yes, I agree with you that while the plan is beautiful, a lot of work should be done to ensure that it is well implemented. And yes, civil servants sometimes, a lot of times they escape the rope, because once the person is done the documentation, it is the person who receives the money that is being held accountable. Or even when there are investigation, when you're out of service, you don't get recalled to answer to what was done in that office. It's the office sometimes that is held accountable, not even the individuals who perpetrated the crime. All right, moving away from that, in the bid to reduce the proportion of retained revenue allocated to debt service, the Nigerian Fiscal Responsibility Commission has advised the federal government to take up action on restructuring its debts and control expenditures by ministries, departments, and agencies. Now, they're calling for implementation and amendments to the Fiscal Responsibility Act 2007 at the national and sub-national levels. The Commission believes that these amendments will align the cap on expenditures of departments with the Finance Act and also establish penalties for violations of the Act. People have also often, or Nigerians have often cried out over the cost of governance and even expenditures. The Nigerian Fiscal Responsibility Commission advising the federal government to take action on restructuring its debt and control expenditure by MDEs. And they also want the implementation or the amendment of the implementation amendment to the Fiscal Responsibility Act 2007, aligning the cap on expenditures of departments with the Finance Act. What is your take on aligning the cap on expenditures of departments in line with the Finance Act?
I think it's a very timely warning, really, looking at the position of the current regime, not to get us over-borrowed. And if you had looked at it, before the approval recently of the supplementary budget and the borrowing, of course, that was going to come with that budget, you know that the servicing of our debt to revenue was about 98%. And with this new debt secured, we were trying to do a raw calculation about 2 weeks ago, and we said if you add this debt to it, the revenue to debt servicing ratio will be about 118%. And that's terrible. So if you have that all your earning, you have to use it to service your debt, and that's not even paying back the principal. It puts the nation in a very precarious state. And this is why it is important that people have to spend responsibly. That where we don't need to do expenditure, we just have to look. That was why you find that in 2024 budget, Ghana actually had removed all public capital expenditure spending because their debt is high, and said, look, let's just maintain ourselves in 2024. If we can pay salary of those who are working, then we know that what we are doing, so that we don't need to secure more debt and put ourselves in a situation where we will not be fit enough or healthy enough to borrow. So this is the real issue we need to talk about, especially at subnational levels, because there's really no supervision there. State government just go ahead, take a loan, do projects, and nobody supervises it. But all of this accumulate to the national debt profile. So I think government must be responsible enough to look at what are we spending revenue on? What are the things that are not necessary, so that we can actually avoid it, and then, of course, ensure that we focus on things that are strategic enough to add value to the economy.
Can we start mentioning things that are not necessary?
Well, there are a whole lot of things that we can talk about that are not necessary. Take, for example, we're living in a world today where people are working all the way from home. Some people are doing hybrid. I don't see what use it is for corporations or MDAs to be building star houses and projects as skyscrapers. They are no longer necessary. You see, because days where that you have a big office and then the office is sprawling and everybody is coming in there. We don't need some of all those things at the moment. So construction of those office buildings that are dropping billions of naira, they are not really necessary because people can work from somewhere. And I remember when, of course, the United Arab Emirates were going e-government to ensure that the services of governments are all unloaded on the portal. The first thing they do was to offload all their buildings, and they turn them into commercial buildings. So if you see MDAs are building big mansions, and these are costing government so much. So we can find a way to see how we can do so many things that we don't need to interface with the public. And that was what the United Arab Emirates said, look, ask themselves, what do we really need to do? Do our citizens need to come to our office, or we should go and see them? So they agreed that they were going to be meeting the citizens at home, not them coming. So the real reason why you are building big offices is because you want to create an ambience when people come and see that you are doing very well. But that does not what make, like they say, who does not make a mock.
What about the size of the civil service?
Yes, of course. We also look at it because if, of course, the work that humans are going to be doing that are no longer necessary, we should not hesitate to actually close those doors. I made this analogy some time ago that when the humanoid industry was founding in China and they know that they would not need so much hand in the factory, what they did was to repurpose these hands to something different. So we should not be afraid to move people into a new sector. If federal government discovered that there are a whole lot of civil servants who are not, who are becoming redundant because of technology, what do we need to do? We need to train them on farming, which of course the law allowed them to do in the time past, and give them equipment and tools.
What about the spending on the National Assembly, state assemblies, and government houses?
Well, I have always had this argument. You see, there's this belief and conception that National Assembly are the one that is, the money we spend on National Assembly is too much. Look at your budget, for example, 2024 budget, 26.01 trillion naira. How much is budgeted on the National Assembly? Less than 200 billion.
What do they need over 100 million car for?
Well, you also must realize that these people are coming in. Some people are new, some people are old. And those who are coming in new into the National Assembly also have the responsibility. There are 3 assignments, of course, that are constitutionally guaranteed to the National Assembly. The first is representation, the second is oversight functions, and then the third is lawmaking. Now, if you have to do oversight, which means you have to be in the agency where these things are working. Now, we have over 900 agencies or 1,200 agencies in Nigeria, ministries and departments, that have to be oversighted by the members of the National Assembly. I don't think buying the car for them is a real problem. Because at the end of the day, really, which the law, of course, allows, not just National Assembly, even including the ministries and departments, whether they are permanent secretaries, director generals of government agencies, all of them also are entitled to buy a car, and they are replaceable every 4 years.
What about cars made in this country? Can't you buy that for them?
Yeah, but it is possible to also buy Nigerian-made car. But again, you also have to look at the ability to be able to maintain these things. This argument neither here or there. I'm not thinking that the problem we have is the cost of buying car for National Assembly.
Okay, let's look at even the issue of buying cars for the National Assembly, because we're talking about MDAs, talking about government reducing expenditure. Now, why the budget, like you said, is just 200 billion? Is it justifiable if we look at some of the things that the money goes to? If the civil service have to cut costs by way of maybe not spending much in building edifices in which the workers work and making them work from home and making use of e-governance and other things, why can't we also look at ways oversight functions can be carried out? And who says that every representative or every member in the National Assembly must have their private cars? Is it possible to have cars provided that when some have to go for oversight functions, it takes them there? Do we need to keep spending? Because looking at it, it seems like it's justified.
Yeah,
The spending is justified.
let Nigerians not overburden themselves on whether members of the National Assembly deserve a car or not. Companies MD, all of them buy Jeep. Nobody. You see, because
But these are some of the practices that raise the expenditure of government.
these are people
cutting them down.
Yeah, of course, you say with company money. Now, in this case, the company is Nigeria itself.
Okay.
And these people are sitting down. You see, it's very easy for somebody to sit down at home and feel that these people do nothing really.
We are not saying
It's
this.
not
You see,
about
but the
doing
issue
nothing,
is that
about-
you are asking your members, see, let's be very clear as a people. When we are talking about managing resources and people are going to do things, you must understand that there's some level of dignity that you give to your public officers. And I remember really specifically in his book, From Third World to First World, Lee Kuan Yew emphasized this. If you want people to give in their best, you must give them what they need to work and work well. I don't think the car is a problem. That's why I'm saying to you, what we are talking about here, the total budget for the National Assembly, is not up to 1% of the entire Nigerian budget. So if you are talking about less than 1% of the entire budget of Nigeria, how does that really become a problem? Imagine that you are spending 50%, 20%, 30% of the national budget on the National Assembly. This is where the complaint should come from. Now, but the real issue is that what is this fraction? And don't forget that by law also, who empowered them to buy those cars, the law also empowered them to actually repay for the cars. So it's not actually a free gift to them. You see, we must be clear about some certain things that our focus should be. There are other issues that we can talk about within the National Assembly that can cut cost. But I don't think this one that, of course, is like an investment, or you give somebody an automobile loan that is going to pay back, should be the real issue that we're talking about. You see, what my emphasis is that there are so many things that we're doing within the MDAs, there are many things that are doing within the executive, where the bulk of the money is spent. These are where we should put our eyes. This is where the emphasis should be. And at the end of the day, that the National Assembly are able to do their work very well, and then, of course, you see them also having the, the kind of joy in really doing what they should do, and they are not hindered by the fact that there are no tools in their hand. That's the point that I'm making. So you can check the budget out, the figure itself, and see what goes to the National Assembly vis-a-vis to the entire budget. So to give you an indication that the problem is really not the National Assembly, and it's far much more than that.
Yeah, the problem is not National Assembly. I agree with you. I'm just saying, if every Nigerian needs to sacrifice and cut costs and the way they live, our National Assembly and our representatives should also do the same thing.
And I think they are doing so.
Okay, so let's move on to power issue. We talked about power yesterday, and the Niger Delta Power Holding Company, NDPHC, says that they remain committed to dedicated to pushing forward with the Light Up Nigeria project, even in the face of considerable debt of 180 billion naira. The project has already commenced with Ibadan Electricity Distribution Company, focusing on supplying electricity to outer industrial clusters and several other areas. But this that they're doing, ensuring that a lot of areas get power, what is your advice to the power sector, the national grid, even as we talked about off-grid solutions yesterday, in ensuring that Nigeria gets powered up, Nigeria gets light up?
I think
areas to be considered.
It's a very simple thing. Very simple thing. This debt we're talking about, owed to these schools, are owed by government agencies, most especially. And this is where, of course, we also look at how we do things responsibly. Many agencies of government use light and they don't want to pay. In short, I think I was in Kano about 2 months ago, and we're having this conversation, and one of the person who was with us and was saying to us, in the university where he lectures, and see, you see, many of the household bypass NEPA They use it to do block, and they are not paying electricity. The whole campus. So this is it. How does this become profitable? And I think this is where the DISCO need to up their game in terms of metering. So if you have prepaid solution to electricity, if your card is finished, your light will be off. You will go and buy more card. As long as you are doing postpaid for this agency, they will not pay. And as long as they are not paying, you will not be able to invest in your critical infrastructure. So for me, it's not even a big problem they should worry about. They should meter everybody and ensure that people are on a prepaid. And if you are going to do a postpaid for anybody, then you enter into a special agreement with that person, and the money should be taken up front. So these are the issues. Because if you set up a company and the company is not making profit and somebody is profiting at the other end, you will discover that this is the issue. That was where I was talking about leakages the other day. That you're having some people who connect to the electricity, and some of them bypass even the metering. Yes, and a whole lot is happening. People bypass the metering, and they are then, of course, enjoying electricity without payment. That's criminal. So these are the issues that we have to look at, and this is where they also need to find a way to up their game. And I think in some places they are already doing that actually, rather than the metering in the houses, you can actually meter on the streets.
Yes, on the street.
In the pole.
Or from the pole, exactly.
So you can determine what current that is coming into this environment from the pole. And so you know what is consumed from the pole. So even if they are bypassing, then you will be able to know. And that will not be a difficulty. So this should not be a rocket science for anybody to do. So we can sit down and look at issues and say, what are the problems? Because like they said in Things Fall Apart, since the hunters had been shooting without missing, now the birds start to fly without perching. So it's a simple thing. So strategy is what you need to put on the ground to see how to overcome the difficulties and challenges of this. We can light up Nigeria if these issues, these leakages are blocked.
It's actually a wonder why some ministries or some government agencies would not want to pay their utility bills, because there must be budget to take care of those things. And the energy consumption in those places, it's really without care sometimes, because hey, it's an estimated billing. And but since you've talked about this, I am very sure that a lot of discos are watching and they say, yes, it's very possible for us to do that. I know the arrangement must have been done out of respect and trust, because it's a government agency, so there's a trust that they will pay.
You see, the real problem with public agencies, to be fair to them, is the budgetary system, which is very faulty. I had this conversation with the members of Public Account Committee of the House of Rep at the unveiling in Abuja the other day. We cannot be talking about performance auditing without talking about performance budget. Now, this envelope system that many ministries and agencies are doing in terms of budgeting is a problem. So when you have an envelope budgetary system, what that means is that if you say, oh, we are going to spend X amount of naira in a year, then, of course, at the appropriation, the accountant office, the accountant general office, can't give you all the money because the money is not available. You know, it's budget, it's a projection. So what they give you an envelope. Say, for example, you are expecting 200 million for that quarter, for all your budget. Then they give you 1 million. Now, agencies prioritize that 1 million. And they spend it on where their heart is. So it's not spread. So that system is the issue. And I was saying the other day that there's a way you design a system that if a pope run it, he will become like a thief. So this is a real issue. So we must change our approach to budgeting. That even if we are going to use the envelope style of budget, but we must merge it with performance budget. To say this envelope that has 500 million, 20,000 is for electricity, 20,000 is for overhead, This one is for maintenance. So it be clear enough so that if there are infractions in terms of implementation, then somebody can be held accountable and consequences meted out to such infractions.
As we wrap up on the news analysis today, let's look at peace and conflict resolution, as the Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution, IPCR, is set to commence a 2-week intensive training for some Nigerians on negotiation and mediation. So the Director General of the Institute, Joseph Ochogu, has stressed the importance of equipping participants with the necessary skills to become agents of change in their families, communities, and beyond. How much of this do we need? Trainings on conflict resolution and negotiation and mediation in families, in communities, and the society generally. In what way, when these persons are trained, in what way would they benefit the society?
I think it will go a long way in actually adding value to what people are doing in society. Again, drawing from the experience of Rwanda after the genocide, I was also privileged to have this conversation around justice system, which of course, especially the English justice system that is always very cumbersome. And then of course, you have to wait for a very long time before you can get justice delivered. So we're asking, how were they able to overcome those challenges, those difficulties within the justice system in Rwanda after the genocide? Because this was a situation where you knew who killed your father or you killed your mother. And then you have to go to court to go defend these issues. So what their president did was to say, let's revamp our traditional justice system. So rather than rely on the English law, we will have to rely on our traditional justice system, where, of course, in a community, everybody sit down. We know what has happened, and certain things and measures were taken. And they gave one example of a certain woman who said, oh, you killed my mother, you killed my husband, and you killed my only children. Now I don't have a child, I don't have a mother. Now you will become my son. So within the ambit of that traditional justice system, now both of them are living together as mother and son. That settlement makes things easy. And this is the real problem that is facing us. I remember, I think it was yesterday or 2 days ago, that the president was saying that the much economic transformation that we need in Nigeria really lies in the hand of the judiciary. Because when you have slow justice system, like we currently have, some cases that are 10 years, 20 years still lying, not even mentioned in the court, they are out there. So once we adopt ADR, alternative dispute resolution mechanism, people could be able to really fast track the process of justice. And then once there is justice, there will be peace. And once there is peace, there will be development.
All right.
Okay, it's always good and faster to get people talking. And this particular training and seminar, I think, goes a long way to teach people how to get people to. You can't settle someone. It's not your place. Your place is to bring them together and let them iron their issues out. And I think this is good and well called for. Besides,
not everyone can afford the cost of litigation, so it just makes it easy for issues to be resolved so they're not escalated into a violent situation. And that's how we wrap up the news analysis this morning. Thank you very much, Idahosa Osamanze, for always availing yourself and your wealth of knowledge here on the table.
My pleasure to be here always.
We're going to quick break, and then we will begin to look at the core issue for today, which is water and sanitation. You agree with me that these are two important and fundamental rights of every living being. After this break, we'll look at them. Stay tuned. how can indigenous languages be promoted in a country like this?
Statistics show that less than 10% of Nigeria, the population of Nigeria, has, have access to health insurance. You imagine if our population is about 200 million and...
This is Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
All right, thank you for staying tuned. Many thanks for being with us on Early Exchange. Now we'll look at water and sanitation. Before I went to that break, I did mention that water and sanitation are fundamental rights of every human being. But it's a global challenge. Access to water is a global challenge because an estimated 2 billion people globally do not have access to clean drinking water. And if you also look at sanitation, it is estimated that about 4.2 billion people do not have good sanitation facilities globally. Now let's look at Nigeria. It is estimated, according to statistics released by the World Bank, that about 70 million Nigerians do not have access to potable water, and about 144 million Nigerians do not also have access to good sanitation facilities. So now you know why we're looking at these issues, because they are critical issues. We'll begin with access to clean drinking water for Nigerians, and we have a guest who will be joining us shortly virtually to look at some of these issues. But Chooks is here. I need to know from Chooks, how is the access to clean drinking water for you personally?
For me personally?
Yes. Are you able to easily access clean drinking water?
We reside here in the city, and it's not a problem for us here in the city compared to those that live in the rural areas. And the three basic things for human life: first air, second water, then food. Every other thing climbs the ladder down. And water is something we can not just take for granted. That we have it in the cities or in other populated areas doesn't mean that others have it the same way. So we'll be looking at how is the government trying to get its policy right to make sure that we have rural water available to people. Are they also trying to make sure that the water bodies in the villages that people use that may not be potable but clean stays the same way and not polluted? Then for those that live in arid regions or places where they have difficulty accessing potable water, what measures are being done to help them get water and stop migration, which also could be as a result of no water?
You talked about being in the urban area, so that's why you have access to clean drinking water. But you also understand that even urbanization is a challenge to access to clean drinking water, where you have too many persons struggling for safe resources. Now, in some areas, you have issues of overcrowding, and you have maybe the water facility in that area not being able to serve the people within that environment. Consider the fact that a lot of water sources now are being provided individually by individual efforts or maybe by private efforts. It's gone are the days, or in a lot of areas, it's like gone are the days where there used to be the public water system or public distribution channels where you just have a tap within your compound or where you live.
Pump.
Okay, pump.
Thank you.
All right, so you have that, and you can just have water because there are pipes connecting to different homes from the general or the central water distribution stations. But that's not something that really happens anymore. So people now have to turn to themselves for the provision of these things. But even at that, the quality of the water that people provide for themselves is also an issue. Now, for some, they can drill boreholes. For some, they are dug up wells, private wells. For some, there are different ways that they are able to access water. But let's talk to an expert on access to drinking water in Nigeria. Joining us right now is Babawale Obayonju, who's a geologist and climate justice campaigner, is joining us virtually. Good morning, Babawale.
Hi, good morning. It's nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me to this space this morning. I hope I'm audible enough.
All right, looking at access to drinking water in Nigeria. When I began this segment, I talked about the World Bank statistics that revealed that about 70 million Nigerians do not have access to potable water. What are your thoughts on that? What are the issues with having access to drinking water in Nigeria?
So firstly, I think we should start from what does it mean to have access? Is the first point of call I think that we should look at. From the definition that has been provided by scientists or researchers, it simply says drinking water from an improved source that is accessible at home, available when needed, and free from facial or priority chemical contamination. So this definition is actually talking about what science or researchers have put forward as having access to water. Why I decided to start from there is because we need to understand some of these terminologies. When you say access, what does it mean? Because I know prior to this definition, people, when we used to grow up, I know maybe some of you experienced that, people used to go to streams to get the water that they need for their homes and store them in clay pots at home. People used to like get water from the roof, store them in drums. They had purification methods, maybe an alum or something. They had vegetables or herbs that they could put on the water that could help cleanse the water from whatever they felt was unhealthy for them. And this kept those guys going for years until we started having the issue of industrialization happening. And people now started, like we've had the companies coming around, those streams were becoming polluted by release of effluents. People started migrating. Like we talked about sanitation system in those places were not commensurate to the amount of people in those spaces. So people had to start defecating in the waters, and that's on its own started creating problems for the people. So access to water is become an issue. Then with the issue of climate change now happening around us, where those same streams that used to supply water, those wells that used to give water are becoming dry. This is becoming also a problem. And for those who even dwell in the urban space, those of us who claim that we live in the cities or the urbanized spaces, we also have an issue with water. I know growing up in the city of Benin, where I live, I grew up to meet public connections at our streets, in our homes, where we could actually have water running either from your own compound or from your neighbor's compound, or from some houses away from you. And this was supplied by the government, and every month a bill was brought just to help the government maintain that system. But all along the line, in the middle 80s, early 80s, middle 80s, early 90s, all of those systems began to collapse because the government were no longer interested in maintaining those systems. And we began to see the advent of boreholes and the like. And all this began to create some other problems that we did not foresee ahead of time. So access to water from this definition is something that we need to look at. People no longer have access to the water they need, when they need it, and where they need it. And this on itself or by itself is a problem that we need to look at. And so I believe this conversation this morning it's a well informed one, and it's a timely one that we need to talk about.
Thank you very much, Babawale. Let's look at the third sentence you said before you concluded. You talked about the government waterworks shutting down. But we know that the government has a lot of very good facilities, though not working. But how can we bring these facilities to work? Because the government still has these connections of pipes laid, they can be relayed, but this particular establishment and facilities still lie in some local government or in some states, some in very good conditions, but not working. And they can provide better treated water to the people within that environment. Unlike what we have boreholes going around right now, and a lot of these boreholes, the water is not potable.
Yeah, so right now with the population increase that we have seen in our cities and in many parts of the country, the government alone might not be able to do this. I know they try to bring up several kinds of policy from the national water policy to the national action plan and all the likes. But in itself, looking at those documents and the policy that they have been trying to institute, there's a part that they have decided that it's no longer working, which was the issue of taking water as a common. Are entitled to this water. We have a right to it. We share those rights. We maintain the source of our water and those kinds. So now what we have begun to see, because the government is trying in their own effort to see how we can distribute this water system to homes or to make people have access to them. They began to give licenses to private individuals who are now beginning to find new ways in sachet water, in bottled water, in packed water, and the likes to begin to distribute it. So if the government, like if those systems were being maintained from the time past, and as the city was growing, the government was also improving on those facilities, by now we wouldn't have a problem. But currently, as far in our cities, the government would have a problem if they're to distribute water from those water facilities, what we call water works or water board. If they're to distribute water from those existing facilities to homes right now, it would be virtually impossible. Because one, urban plan have not been obeyed by many citizens across the country. Pathways that would have been places where these pipelines would have passed through to get to homes for distribution, many have built on them. They've constructed roads across some of them. They made culverts across some of them, and on the like. So now for the government, that would be a difficult place. It's going to be a difficult project. But what I think the government can look at, how can we harness the strength or the synergy of community people and the water that they have at home? That's something we need to look at. There's a story ahead of Germany about their renewable energy sources, the solar system, the wind energy. I heard the government of Germany, what they have done. They created an incentive that if homes can provide energy beyond what they need, the excess energy that they have, they share it back to the national grid, or the national supply in that their region, that community, that place where they live, that is distributed to those who don't have the same amount of resource, so that energy is sufficient for everybody. So if the government looks into that kind of a policy and see how can we support homes that already have existing boreholes, how can we synergize these boreholes and create a central point in new localities, in even existing localities, so that they be central distribution owned by the people, maintained by the people, and also distributed by the people, so that everyone has access to that water supply. That could be a possibility to look. So it's something that we all need to critically look at and not think about the way the capitalist system has been built, that we need to commodify water, to put a price on water, that if you don't put a price on water, people would value it. It's not true. Because, like you said in your initial conversation, air, water, and food, these are things that humans water supply. Humans have the capacity to maintain it. And I believe if we continue or strengthen that system of seeing water as a common good, where it's shared by us, we can look at systems that can help us provide water for ourselves, manage it for ourselves with the support of the government, our incentive of the government. That is one of the way out. It's not the only way out, but it's one of the way out. So I think we should look at that part of it.
Okay, one of the ways out of water scarcity that you just talked about, sounds a very good one and something that is feasible to achieve. But right now, we currently have individuals having boreholes within where they stay. But the quality of the water that comes from the borehole, sometimes in some areas you find that the water in its color itself shows it's not very clean. So what are the ways to handle the quality of the water to ensure that it is not just you having access to water, but you're having access to clean drinking water?
So that is now we are not coming back
from those water sources.
The area of hydrogeology. Yeah, we're coming back to the area of hydrogeology, because now there are different forms of aquifer that we have underneath us, under the soil that we work on. There are different kinds of aquifer. Typically, when I was in secondary school, my secondary school was in Ondo State, and it was sited in a basement complex area, what we call those hard rocks, like the granite, the metamorphic rock, the metamorphic, the schist and the likes. All those had basement strong rocks. That was where my school was sited. So I remember that was around 1991, the PTA decided to sink a borehole in my school, which was very expensive at that time. But the people who came to sink the borehole dug the well and found water at a point. Because they found water at that point, they did not go further to check the extent or the amount or the quantity of the water and the quality of the water they found. Because they stumbled on the water, they stopped drilling. And what did we have? It was found, from now that I have the knowledge, it was actually fixed on what scientists call perched aquifer. It's not a water body or a storage that is huge enough to sustain people for a long time. It can only sustain people for that period of time where the recharge, rainfall is commensurate to the amount of water extracted. After the rainy season, when the amount well, what we got to a point where we always experience dried borehole. You go to the borehole, turn it on, it doesn't release water because no water is found in that aquifer. So the same is happening across cities. So many of them don't have training to do this stuff because it requires a lot of some extent of combined efforts, the manual effort and the scientific effort. There are different layers of water. For you to get clean drinking or drinkable water, you have to drink to a particular depth, which varies from city to city, from locality to locality. So most people, when they just drill water and they get to a place where they find so-called or looking like water that is a place where water just gushes out, not fully clean, it's a bit contaminated because we're going to the scientific part now. Where now we're talking about flooding. Flooding is happening everywhere. The soil, water percolates, dirty water percolates into the soil and hits that first layer of the water table. And when people drill wells or drill boreholes, they get to that particular place, this early place where you find water and stop. So this is happening across many places because they are not doing a combined effort with the manual and the scientists coming together to make sure we all have access to that layer of water that is clean for all of us. So there's need for that form of collaboration to begin to happen so that people can have access to clean water. So that is one of the things that is missing in the mix. In the place where we live, there's this same thing happen. When the guys drilled water to a point, they felt they found water. But when we looked at the scenario of the kind of water that was coming out, we did some analysis on that and realized this is not the place that they still need to go further down. And when they went further down, they found clean water, which we have access to today. So these are things that needs to be checked for us to ensure that the wells that we drill at home, the boreholes that we have at home, gets to that place, that aquifer that is clean and potable for us to drink. That's something we need to look at. Let me stop there.
When it gets to that point where the water is clean, is it safe to consume it just like that, or it still needs some form of treatment?
Well, yes, some areas, for example, areas where you have many industrial parks or industries happening where many of the industries operating in our climate are not so conscious about the environment. It leaves a lot of effluent, waste, and pollutes water bodies, pollute the soil. When rain falls, it washes the effluent, takes it as it's moving, it's somewhat percolating and down. So we need some form of treatment in those areas prone to such industrial activities, and even in areas where those activities are not high. If we do tests on the kind of water, because we don't do tests on the kind of water that we extract from those boreholes, we'll not be sure. We can be assuming that they are not clean. But if we carry a test on the water that comes out from our boreholes and we see the extent of contamination, then we'll know the kind of treatment that will be required for those kind of boreholes. That's one of the things that first initiative I talked about would also help communities to achieve. if communities bring their efforts together, like most communities around Nigeria, they all resorted to self-help for power, for water, whatever, for roads and everything. So if the government finds a way to support this kind of initiatives around, which is the way forward right now, then we'll be able to have access to funds that can help us test the kind of water that we have, what kind of treatment we need, because some of this water don't require treatment. For example, some of these natural springs that we have, you can actually go there and drink plain when it's not polluted. You can drink from it clean and you're healthy and you're fine. But there are other water sources that have been contaminated by different kinds of things that humans have brought into the skin that we need to test for. So if test is carried out, then we'll be able to know what kind of pollution exists, what kind of contamination exists, and what kind of treatment we will need. So not all water sources need treatment actually, because from our ancient times, our aged parents, they drank those kind of water. And the ones they felt that were polluted, they had herbs that they can put on the water that they felt and they believed helped to decontaminate those water sources. And we are okay. And actually, they even live longer lives than we live today. So there's something that we need to think about as we proceed.
Okay, Baba Wale, let's look at this. As we move from the south to the north and further north, access to clean, portable drinking water becomes more difficult. Now, let's look at those at the farthest part of the north, towards the Sahel. What can be done to assist those rural areas get the same portable water that we take for granted here?
Yeah, so there's no one cap fits all solution to that problem. Yes, the north is experiencing a lot of droughts because of climate change. Many of their streams, many of their lakes are all drying up and the likes. Like Lake Chad, for example, it's been said that almost there used to be 22,000 kilometers square in 1963. Currently, it's said that only 304 kilometers is left, if not less than that now. But this statistic was around 2,000. So they're already experiencing that kind of drought and that kind of scenario. Yes, sadly, if we're to get infrastructure that would bring water from a close-by source to the north, it will require a huge amount of money. I can't really provide a solution, honestly. I wouldn't even try to provide a solution. But I think one of the ways is to definitely, we can't say they should relocate from their lands. There has to be a way out of it. Even in those dry areas, even in the desert, there are still ways to find water. So we need to have a combination of science and funds available to make this possible for the Northerners. And an irrigation project around Kano on the water source that they have.
With Baba Wale's, so we may not be able to continue the conversation until connection is better with him. But he's been talking about ways to ensure that people in the northern region where it's kind of hard for them to get potable water given the geography and the topography of the place. There are certain things that can be done to make that happen. Different kinds of technologies and innovations can be done to ensure that they have access to clean drinking water. But I was going to ask him, when he talked about testing water, the water test, you know, in primary school at elementary level, we're taught that clean water should be tasteless, should be colorless, and should be odorless. Shouldn't that be enough to be able to ascertain the quality of water? Because when you see the color of the water already, you see that it is not clean. It has color. That already indicates the water isn't clean. it has smell, it has odor, of course, that indicates it isn't clean. Then when you taste the water, when you drink the water, it has taste. Those three things tells you that it is not clean. But I'd like to ask him as an expert to know if people can on their own carry out a test using these three three indices to ascertain the cleanness of water. But besides that, it's talked about some water sources being contaminated, which brings us to the issue of sanitation. Now, when houses are built for modern houses, a lot of times there is good sanitation structure, but for some homes in deplorable condition, maybe dilapidated buildings and those in the rural areas where water is even a challenge because the availability of water to a good extent determines the sanitation that you would have. If you have the water system and you do not have water, then it's also a problem for you. So these issues are interconnected. Addressing clean water scarcity would also mean addressing sanitation, because where you have clean water sources, you have pollution coming from poor sanitation facilities, then it just makes it a problem.
Yes, it makes it a problem, and it's a big one. Some years back, a few years back, we had this bad statistics. Nigeria was rated as one of the first countries that suffers from open defecation. Very bad statistics. And what this does is, when the rain comes, it washes all this and takes them straight to a water body and contaminates this same water body that either we are taking for cooking or taking to base, or just these same water bodies that we are using.
Okay. Babawale is back, so let's continue the conversation with him. Babawale, thank you for staying with us.
Yeah, thank you very much for being patient. Well, the internet doesn't want us to be great this morning, but we'll find a way around.
We have to talk about it because these are critical issues. So a while ago, you were talking about water tests.
Yeah.
People carrying out a test on their boreholes to ascertain the cleanness of the water that comes from them. But at elementary level, we're taught that clean water should be tasteless, should be odorless, and colorless. Observing these three things, is it enough to determine on your own if the water is clean enough for you to drink without actually taking the water to a laboratory? Because not every home can do that.
Yeah, scientifically, I think scientifically, the way to test if water is actually clean is to take it to the lab. Once I visited South Africa, Genadendal, the water I drank was brown in color. The town drinks a brown colored water, but the water is clean. So the color, that it beats that scientific definition that water has to be colorless or to be acclaimed to be clean. So the true test to know if the quality of water is good or not, is to take it to a laboratory. And it's part of why we have children we are training in school who are science lab technologists, who are microbiologists. We should begin to use the knowledge of these people we are training, our children we are training, that we are sending to school, to begin to look for new ways, accessible ways, cheap ways for people around their community and their homes to test for water. So testing water scientifically is one sure way to determine if it's clean. But I know the villagers, our forefathers, our aged people, they also had local mechanisms to check if water is clean or not. And it works for them. So we also need to look at how we can research on that and find out how they did it in time past and learn from them.
Water, what is the time frame? How often should water be treated? If you have a borehole in your house, for instance, what is the time frame? Is it like every 6 months, every year? Just let us know.
Yeah, statistics, it's just an observation. Pollution can happen at any time. Contamination can happen at any time. So it's just for you to be observant, be watchful. And yes, science, you can actually check. You can give yourself 3 months. You can give yourself, like most houses have water filters attached to the pipes that brings water from the tank. Change those filters always, like once a month, once 2 months. Once you observe it's becoming dirty, change it, you get a new filter. But to test it, you have to be observant because pollution can happen at any time. And with the rate of flooding happening around, there is certainty that the aquifers that we have would be contaminated because of the high level of rainfall that we have and percolation that will happen. So there's need for us to actually begin to look at how can we support ourselves, because not everybody can afford it. How can we support ourselves as community? How can we see water as common good and not think about water as a commodity or privatize water? It is not a way out of this problem. We need to begin to look at how can we harness the knowledge we have in our communities, the children we have trained in school about, who have gone to study science, lab tech, microbiology, and all this kind of scientific stuff. How can we harness their knowledge within our communities to help us do these things with equipment or in an affordable way that will help communities? We need to look at water as a common good and not see water as a commodity that we have to privatize or begin to put a price tag on. That way we can look at it and solve some of this problem.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Babawale. We are grateful to have had you this morning. If we had extra time, we'll keep going and going, but we need to go on a short break, and when we return, we will have another guest, and we will be talking about waste management, wastewater management, and pollution control. It's still Soup News, and you are on Early Exchange.
There's been a lot of fund raised, especially in the tech environment in Nigeria, and there's every need to be cautious, not to think that the fundraise itself is the end point. It's a means to an end. If the job is 100%, the fundraise is just 20. There's still 80% to go. So what you certainly do not do is to raise funds and shortly thereafter go onto social media and brag about the brand new car you bought or the apartment you've moved into in Banana Island. It doesn't make for good optics. And unfortunately, when you really need the benefit of doubt, you might not get it from your investors. You don't raise money and then ask, so what should I do with the money? At that time, it's too late, you've lost the plot. When you raise money, you would have raised it based on the back of an agreement with your investor, clearly outlining how the money will be spent, and how the returns will come. It's imperative to stick to that plan. And if anything changes in the environment or in the business and you have to pivot, or there's going to be a significant change, it's imperative to then get the buy-in of the investor. The investors are not philanthropists. This is what we need to understand. They are not giving grants. The investors are astute businessmen who are not necessarily content with the normal rate of returns of placing money in the bank or buying bonds. And that's why they take the risk of putting their funds in a risky venture, such as a startup, which has no track record. What we have to bear in mind is that when the investor gives you any amount of money to invest in the business, come rain or shine, he will typically ask you for 3 times of that in 5 years. So let's do the math. Let's say that I took $1 million as a raise from an investor in, say, 2015, when the dollar was 200 naira per dollar. 5 years on, in 2020, I'll be expected to return to that investor $3 million. $3 million in 2020 at 440 per dollar is about 1.32 billion naira. Now, if you keep the money for longer, then it's even getting more tricky because the exchange rate is falling and you have to do more to pay back. Let's put that figure aside. Bear it in mind, 1.32 billion. If I had approached the bank in 2015 to borrow the same amount of $1 million, at that time it was 200 million naira. So I borrowed 200 million naira. Interest rate is 20%. In 5 years, that's another 200 naira. So what I'll return to the bank will be 200 naira interest plus 200 million naira that I borrowed. I'll be returning 400 million naira. And then compare this in the same period with someone who raised money and has to return 1.32 billion naira. This gives you a sense when I say that raising the money is just the tip of the iceberg. If your business has not reached an inflection point, if your business has not proved this concept, then venture capital money may not necessarily be for you unless there is a match, which means you are earning in the currency that you borrowed in. So you borrowed in dollars and then you are earning in dollars. Or you have what we call a forward contract with a bank to hedge against exchange loss, if it is available. But if not, then you take VC money when you have captured the cost of building the business such that any additional customer is a contribution margin. In that case, it makes sense to scale very quickly because every customer is adding to the bottom line. That is when it makes sense to take the VC money because then they are sharing in the profit and they are helping you to grow the business quickly to deliver that profit. Bear in mind, raising money is not an end in itself. It's a means to an end. Pursue that end.
How can indigenous languages be promoted in a country like this?
Statistics show that less than 10% of Nigeria, the population of Nigeria, has have access to health insurance. You imagine if our population is about 200 million and
This is Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Welcome, and this is still Soup News. We are on Early Exchange Live. We're still discussing one of the elements of life, water. We're looking at water and sanitation, access to clean, portable drinking water. We'll be looking at water supply and distribution challenges in Nigeria, and we're looking forward to another guest joining us on the show. Before we get him signed on, let's get to ask some nice questions. Okay, our head is ready. Hello, Aro. Aro Leonard is an environmentalist and is a media practitioner too. One of reports. Aro, can you hear us? Hello, Aro. Good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Good morning, Aro. How are you doing today?
Okay, good. I'm cool. Good to be here. How are you guys doing?
We're good. Can you speak up? Are you scared of us? Are you there?
Okay. Can you hear me well now? There seem to be some network issues here. Can you hear me well?
Definitely we can. Okay, good. So, Aro, we are looking at water supply and distribution challenges in Nigeria. Right now, I think you are in Abuja, so that shouldn't be an issue for you. So, for those outside Abuja, what is it like? You're laughing. What is it like for them to have not just potable water, but it being distributed from source to a place where they can easily reach and access?
Okay, let me correct that impression. First of all, majority of the people in Abuja currently do not have access to clean water. If what we call access is when probably the government authority and the water corporation gives you water. Now, what we have is a case where in their pockets to provide their own water. So that's the kind of access that we have when you have the resources to do that. So all those who don't have such resources don't have that access. And that's the situation of things. A couple of years ago, Abuja had access. In fact, Abuja had the cleanest water in the world, you know, when the city was the city, not what it is now, you know, where to me, it's been turned into some kind of glorified village. That's really unfortunate, but that's the truth of the matter. But by and large, because let's say people here, you have more high income earning people than in other parts of the country, so people could provide their own water. Even people in the suburbs have to buy water, so and they could do that because they have money to do that. But if not, it's not a really nice situation. In Lagos, where you are, one would expect that those living in Ikoyi, for instance, Eyebrow, Banana Islands, and all those kind of places would also have access, but it's not the case. In fact, their case is even worse than those in Abuja. Abuja, at least you have your house, you can drill, bowl, even though you eat some rocks, but you get water somehow if you have the resources to do that. But in a place like Ikoyi, for instance, and several other parts of Lagos Island, you find out that underground pollution is terrible. And so even when you drill, the water still comes out polluted. So even with all the money and all that, living on top of water, but yet those there can't have access. So they have to now spend extra money purifying the water. So they have to get a lot of purifying osmosis and some other things in order to drink water in your house. So it's like setting up what you call, these are pure water factory in your house in order to drink water. So if you look at that and you look at that in terms of access, general access, you find out that majority of Nigerians still don't have access to clean water, despite the fact that we are one of the countries with abundant water resources, fresh water resources, not ocean now, fresh water resources. That's what you drink. And in Nigeria, water resources is not a problem. In fact, we have more than enough. In Abuja here, rain is still falling. This is November, and we're still having rain in Abuja here. And you can imagine, in the southern part of the country, rain doesn't stop December to December. So we have more than enough. We have rivers. The largest river in Africa is here. We have Niger, Benue, and all these, so many others. Even up north that you think you don't have, you have loads of them. There's River Gongola, River Kaduna, name them. Up to Yobe, you have rivers all over the place. And the Lake Chad is there, Lake Kanji is there, and so many. So we have abundant water resources, but in terms of distribution, which is your focus today, access is really poor.
All right, since we have abundant water resources, what are the ways to ensure distribution, the use of these water resources, that they're well managed and distributed? We do not really have the public water system working in a lot of cities in Nigeria. What is the way to go about that?
The thing is, apart from the fact that we need to have a strategy, you must have a proper communication strategy in everything, which we don't currently have. So we have a Ministry of Water Resources, embark some projects here and there, but we don't really know what we want to do with it. We don't know how to, take items one at a time and solve them. We come up with, each year we come up with, you hear huge statements. We want to do this, we want to do that. Just take it one step at a time and solve those problems. That's one. Two, it cannot be a government alone thing. The government just needs to create the environment. Government does its part. There's where government can take care of, where individuals should do that. But it's a public-private partnership kind of thing. But the way we see things happening in Nigeria is that we see government officials wanting to embark on certain projects in certain places where even private companies and individuals can handle such projects. All they just need is some kind of tax rebate or appropriate environment. But for corruption issues, individuals wanting to do projects in those places, whereas the places where the need is, nobody looks at those areas. So it's about planning our resources. That is what we are not doing. We have more than enough, but you have to sit down and draw up a plan. You need to do a lot of data, collect a lot of data, and do data analysis to know what the issue really is in certain areas. You don't just go drill a borehole somewhere because you want to do a water project there. Is it borehole that is the best thing to do there? Are there other things you could do, to get water to the people? So it's about that kind of planning, and which is what the government has not been able to do, which we can do. Now, when we plan properly, you will know, for instance, let's take, for instance, the Dangote refinery there. I would not expect the government to go and start providing water for the residents of those areas. It's for the government to go in partnership with the refinery, and the refinery will handle that. Now, in the oil producing areas, for a long time, it's been the oil companies providing water to most of the communities there, not government. So you leave those areas, then you move on to the areas where you don't have such companies, you don't have such corporations, and then you handle that. Now, in areas where you have estates, like on Airport Road here in Abuja, Lugbe area, where you have loads of estates, the government doesn't necessarily need to come, provide water to every household. They might just provide the central one and then work with the various estates. In fact, it's part of the, when allocation was given to estates, if you check what the estates usually write that they are doing, there's supposed to be a central water system in each estate. In my estate, for instance, we all have to drill our boreholes ourselves. It shouldn't be, because that causes another problem. Now, if the estates are mandated and it's part of the old setup when government is allocating the land for them for mass housing. They do that central water system, and then the residents collectively pay for it. You know, if you can buy a house in an estate, you can pay for such services. So the government doesn't necessarily need to go there, but the government can now focus on those rural communities where they don't have such resources to do such things. So it's more about planning, reorganizing our resources, collecting data, know who is where and what is needed where, and then work with private organizations, individuals and private organizations to provide these services.
Okay, thank you very much, Aro. We have several river basins across the north, even somewhere in the middle belt. For those in Abuja, they have Lower Usman Dam, I think I'm right. And their neighboring state, just Mina, have Tagwai Dam. And all these places are there. The infrastructure is there. Now we are talking distribution. We can't talk distribution without having the water treated and ready to be supplied. So is it possible for us to say, let's look for a means of turning this into private hands or having a partnership with private hands to run these facilities, because they are there. And the longer they stay there, we know that these things will just go rot.
I am not in support of handing facilities over to private organizations. That I've never been in support of it. We've seen it happen in Nigeria here, where you hand things over to private organizations and the prices keep going up. Take, for instance, your electricity distribution. And you see, when we want to copy, because we like to copy and paste, we will go and say, oh, that's how it's done in the US, in the UK, everybody pays for this, everybody pays for that. We must look at our own situation. There are basic things you need to thrive. I give an example. For instance, if you go to Helsinki in Finland or the Netherlands, these are smart cities, where some of the best smart cities in the world, where water distribution is controlled by artificial intelligence. A lot of computer stuff goes into it. Now, you see, people in those places don't have to pay that much for data. Data is available there. So there are so many things that are available. There are services that are available. The roads are there. Everything you need is there. You fall sick, you go to the hospital, you know, it's there. So there are many people in Nigeria who are willing to pay for services that are not there. Now, if, for instance, those services, all the infrastructure is working well in the country, those who can pay would pay, so that government will now use that money to subsidize for those who cannot pay. So in Nigeria, the proportion of people who are able to afford services is very, very minute. So we are not like any of those countries. A private individual that takes over a water plant, is he doing it to make his money back, people? So I don't believe handing over to private fully. It can be a partner private. You don't just, you can have companies that you can give tax rebates in so many areas and whatever for them to run those services, but the government must have a stake. So the day the individual company misbehaves, government will collect its property back, because certain services are supposed to be made available for everybody. If we are talking about economic growth, you need electricity for that, you need transportation for that, you need water for that. You know, without water, you can't stay healthy. So such things, water, transportation, electricity, even housing, are supposed to be things that should be available for every citizen if we want to grow as a nation. So I don't believe that. Now, I believe also that government services can work well. It has worked well in the past. it wasn't not Nigerians that were running things in the past. The private corporations we claim that are doing well, are they not run by Nigerians? The challenge is that we have a problem with our orientation in the civil service, which we need to deal with. If people are reoriented and they know what providing service is, how it affects them as individuals, then the attitude will change. I don't believe that. See, a lot of things that happen with this infrastructure you mentioned are mainly sabotage and corruption. That's what happens. That's just the simple truth. But anybody can run these things and get them to work. So the worst government can do is pull in private organizations and give them concession elsewhere. So they run it not to make money and rip people off, but they are looking at the other concession they are getting elsewhere and they run these things. So that's why I would go with working with already established company. I gave an example of the Dangote refinery. I gave example of the oil companies in the South. You have NASCO company in Jos. You know, there are so many companies that the government can work with and they can.
For the public-private partnership, we understand that some infrastructure that the Water Corporation had in those days, some of them are still there and can still work. But are there new ways, innovations, ways that technology can come into the distribution of water to make it easy? And how will it go? Because the structure of some cities have changed.
The best thing that happens, like, I didn't get the last thing you said.
I added that the structure of some cities had changed. The way pipes were laid out and channeled to homes in those days, along those lines, certain structures have been built. So what is the way to use technology now to ensure that whether it's government run or privately run, these infrastructures for water supply are there?
Okay, of course, and that's one of the biggest challenges in Abuja here. Most of the pipes laid in those days are all gone. And that's why people can have water easily even in the city center. But what someone like me as a water resources manager, my project was actually on my thesis was actually on water supply system in Abuja, is proper metering. That's one of the things that could be done for areas where people can pay. Another thing I suggest is, even though this was not part of my project then, but it's something I have seen over time, is decentralization of the system. Now, what we have is that when there's a breakdown, an issue at the Lower Usma Dam, there's a problem. Even though we have a backup system in Abuja in the artificial Jabi lake that was created, but the main purification area is at the Lower Usma Dam. Now, when there is a major issue there, then water supply will be cut off. Now, where I am in Lugbe, we are not connected to that water system. We have our own individual boreholes in our house. Now, I drilled my own borehole way back 2016 or thereabout. It's not gone down. It's not dried up. It's still there. You know, pumping. I supply different people water and all that. So what that means is that you could have a mini borehole system on the airport road serving this whole area with a purification plant there. So if there is a breakdown somewhere, you could easily channel water. We are doing this now online via the internet. You have breakdown in different areas. You have fiber optics cables laid. Now, there might be construction problem that would terminate the cable at one point. But because they have different nodes in different areas, what the telecoms companies do is that immediately that happens, they just redirect the flow. And that is one way we could use. You don't even need too much smart technology to do this. Just create those mini water points and then interconnect them. So if there's a breakdown somewhere, you just move it rather than embarking on this very huge project. For instance, for over 2 decades, there has been a project ongoing to move water from the Gurara waterfalls in Niger State into Abuja to augment for shortage in supply here. That project is still on till today. In Delta State, where my BSc project was on, the water project there started in the 90s, early 90s. I did that project there in 1996. Funded in the early 90s, is still there uncompleted till today. At one point, they told us that we saw on the newspaper that within a short period, that was during the Governor Duagan's time, that it would be completed. In fact, the newspaper carried that the project has been completed. It's still there till today, uncompleted. But if we embark on smaller projects, you know, in local areas, and then link them together, it will solve this distribution problem. And you find that private individuals can come, banks can support. You don't have to wait for AFDB funding, World Bank funding, the Middle East source of water, and then they have to embark on some major project to distribute it. No, in Nigeria, you get water anywhere. So little projects in little places, interconnect them, just like will solve this problem.
All right. Access to clean water is not only critical for households, but also for industries, also for agriculture. But the approach needs to be different. The approach in ensuring water distribution for household would need to be different for that of agriculture and industries. For agriculture, you see, water, and it's sad that, you know, water that the farms need is also part of what destroys the farms. Every year we find flooding happening. That shouldn't be. And it's simple. Our data collection and data analysis system is terrible. And that is where you have enough information. The application of AI, also artificial technology, can come in and help, where you could project things. And then this information, through proper communication channels, are made available to farmers and everybody. For instance, take the flooding coming from the dam in Cameroon. We've talked about this before. And that was the plan right from the 70s. We know what to do in Nigeria, but somehow we just don't do it. So, you know, the agric areas in all those places, Taraba, Benue, Adamawa, Plateau, all those areas, Kogi, we know the farm areas there. What stops us from creating, for instance, the Jabi Lake in Abuja is a wonderful sight. If you're flying above Abuja and you see the lake, it's a wonderful sight. The Kanji Lake also, it's man-made. Those were not natural lakes. Those are the kind of things that should be created in that axis. There's none there. Now you make it, because you're able to calculate the volume of water that is coming in from the dam whenever it's opened.
Two, you are able to also calculate the volume of water from rainfall that will come. You are able, through proper data analysis, you are able to project when the rain will start, when it will end, when it will get to its peak. Everything, all these things are there, and our National Meteorological Agency has all this information, but it's about putting it into practice. Now, when you do that, you also know the water flow. You know the flood-prone areas of the River Benue. So what do? Simple. Channel these waters in and then create artificial lakes there, so that when there's flooding, the water goes into the artificial lake, and then during the dry season is also channeled for farming. It's as simple as that. But we somehow don't. By now, I would have expected that the project to do something like that, which has been there since the 70s, should have been done. We would have seen a couple of projects now, being executed by the federal government, but nobody is thinking about it until when another flood disaster happens, then we start talking about it again. The other one is rain harvesting. We know the volume of rain, how much rain harvesting is done. Even in urban areas like Lagos, when we were growing up, everybody had a tank outside where we harvested rain water and we used it. Now nobody even bothers. Everybody builds house, and then we depend on the, what do we call them, Merua guys, to fetch water for us in jerrycan, even to take your bath, and then rainwater is wasted. That is a crime. God will ask us one day why we are wasting rainwater, and then it floods our roads, floods everywhere. But this is something we could do. Every household get a tank and harvest rainwater. It will reduce the flooding in front of your house, because you've cut that flow. These are projects the government can work on. Have key areas where rain is harvested, and then you reduce flooding on the roads. It's as simple as that. You go to some areas in Ikoyi and Lekki, you can't move. This is where government will come in, and most of that flooding there is not from flooding coming from the Atlantic Ocean, it's flooding coming from rain. So you do rain harvesting, encourage every household, and you show example by you doing key projects for rain harvesting, and encourage every house. And then the other part again is the drainage channels. Now, if you go to places like Iran, Israel, they have tunnels that, just like I was talking about the project to channel water from Gurara to Abuja, they are big, huge tunnel-like pipes that are laid underground that will channel this water. So you could have things like that at strategic points, to channel water into farmlands, into places where water is needed, and also channel the rainwater to wherever it's needed, or to where you need to dispose it. You could do those kind of things to channel water to industrial zones where the industries would use that water. Things like that, basic things, and that is what is really lacking in Nigeria.
All right, let's talk about the distribution channels themselves. The kind of distribution channel could also expose the water to contamination or contaminants. So what should be what should a distribution channel ideally be made of? We've seen plastic pipes being used in times past, but are they durable? So what kind of distribution channel will enable the water get to those who use them, and also ensure that it is difficult for the water to be contaminated?
Well, that's a difficult one, even though, any pipe that can corrode is not something you use. That's what was used in Abuja, where we are having problems. And then when you talk about plastic pipes, it's not just plastic pipes. Those ones can get broken also at any time. You find, I see that sometimes on the road, even in houses, you know, people put those kind of pipe. There are certain types that are made of materials that don't break easily. Those are, for me, the best ones. I'm not an engineer in that aspect, but I think those ones are the best ones. And there's also, because when you use plastic, there's also issues around it, which could make the plastic melt, and then, you know, plastic is poisonous, whether you like it or not. Even though we can't do without it, it's poisonous. But when it's in a state where it does not melt, where water just flows freely on top, there is no scratch or whatever that could bring out particles from it, then those ones are the best. In some houses, you'll see these white pipes that are thick and strong. Those ones are better. And that is where my issue with standards organizations of Nigeria comes in, because part of the problem we have with water supply in Nigeria is wastage through leakages. Now you find, and the leakages are not just from the government-owned infrastructure, even though the government-owned infrastructure is not much again in Nigeria, but not just from the government-owned infrastructure, from private infrastructure at home. You go in front of some houses,
we're out of time,
you see leakages there.
Because thank you very much for joining in and talking to us about water supply and distribution in Nigeria. Yes, I got what you were saying. Ensuring that there are no leakages and using the best of equipment to channel water to houses, industries, and for agricultural purposes. Thank you once again for being on the show. And that's our segment. We'll go on a quick break.
Thank you very much.
To look at wastewater management. To stay tuned. How can indigenous languages be promoted in a country like this?
You know, statistics show that less than 10% of Nigeria, the population of Nigeria, has you know, have access to health insurance. You imagine if our population is about 200 million. And
this is Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Glad to know you're still with us on Early Exchange this beautiful Wednesday morning, and we'll be looking at water and sanitation. They are interconnected because you need water to have a good sanitation system, and a good sanitation system also ensures that the water stays clean and free of contamination. Now let's look at wastewater management. It is known that the water sources that we currently have globally, some of them are not sustainable. Going forward over years to come, some of them may dry up, as we've also seen climate change impact on some of the water sources. Water source like Lake Chad, even in this time and age, is not what it used to be. We have water sources drying up. So how then do we ensure sustainable water supply? This is the reason we'll be looking at wastewater management. Joining us shortly will be an expert to talk about how wastewater can be managed, recycled for use again. But Chooks, the mere thought of it, wastewater management, seems like it's impossible. Now, how do you collect water that you've used maybe to wash your clothes, water you've used to do other chores? How do you collect them back and recycle? Not to mention the one that's in the sewage system.
Water is universal. And first, nature is something that we can't really explain sometimes. Now, nature on its own purifies water. Dirty water gets on the ground, sips. The lower it goes, it gets cleaner. It passes the topsoil, it gets to, by the time it gets down to the where you have the water table, it's already clean. That's what nature does. Same thing it does with grass, with leaves. You can also use that. Nature also uses that to purify water. Now, most time we leave this particular knowledge that nature has given us, and we decide to focus on the science of it, forgetting that even this particular one that nature has given us is also a very good science. How did our parents or our forefathers, how did they live? Apart from having good source of water from the rivers, they also had clay pots. They had some other form of sand that they passed their water through. And it's the same technology that our waterworks are using, without the chlorine. And it was good and it saved them. Now for wastewater, this is where our issue now lies.
Yes.
We have industries. We have
households.
Household use. For the ones we use in washing plates and clothes, the major issue we have there is majorly the detergent. That could also be a problem, but not as much as those particular ones coming from industries. Your dyes, your chemicals.
The ones that are heavily chemicalized.
Yes. For those particular water bodies, we need those particular ones to go to some particular specific systems that has to work on them.
Okay, so we need proper planning to even know where water coming from every part, maybe for industries, for household, where they should go to, so it's easy to repurpose the water. We'll talk more about this after this break. can indigenous languages be promoted in a country like this?
Statistics show that less than 10% of Nigeria, the population of Nigeria, has have access to health insurance. You imagine if our population is about 200 million, and
this is Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
All right, thanks for being there. Looking at wastewater management, because we need to ensure that our water sources are sustainable looking ahead into the future. If we don't do that right now, it may come to a time where the water sources that we seem to have or we have in abundance in Nigeria may not be what they are right now. They may not be abundant anymore. So how do we repurpose water that we have used? Before we went on the break, Chuk was talking about having it planned. For instance, in the home, every part where water is used, it goes to a separate channel. Your bathing water goes to a channel, and then the one from the kitchen goes to a channel, and commonly they get to a common sewage system, but some separate them, so it's easy to manage. But what you're saying is that not just for households, for industries, it depends on the kind of industry. There should be that kind of segmentation, so that when they want to treat the water or recycle the water, it's quite easy to handle.
Yes, for industries, most of them don't recycle their water. What we have now is we have industries that some of them will dump their water waste into our own waterways. So
contaminating.
Exactly. Apart from
water sources.
Apart from contaminating the water sources, also affecting the marine life in those particular areas. Then also for those that come to our homes to pick up the PSP that come to your home to pick up the waste from the homes. Most of them don't go through recycling. Most of them don't go through treatment. They just dump them somewhere. And this is where I like the Lagos State government. They came very hard on them recently. Now, what do we see? There are some areas in Lagos where you go to, and when you're driving through, you need to just make sure that you wind up your glasses.
Because of the stench.
Yes, apart from the stench. Then there are some areas, I won't mention names. If you look at that particular place, you notice that the color of the soil is different. It's just that particular place. Most times you see it dark. Then when you drive after a few kilometers, you now see normal color because of what they've been dumping there for a while. For waters from industries, this needs to be treated, even before taking them back or putting them back into the water bodies. Let's give an example. There was a nuclear seepage. There was a nuclear seepage in Fukushima some years back. Till now, it's still causing international tension because countries around is telling them, if you tell us you've treated this water, why don't you let us inspect it before dumping it into the ocean?
So it's not just about managing wastewater for reuse. It's also about managing wastewater to prevent pollution.
To prevent pollution, serious pollution.
Two sides to this coin. All right. Now, looking at that, it will need a lot of regulation.
Regulation and
particularly,
monitoring.
yes, particularly on the industrial side, because for homes, barely would any kind of contamination come from water used in the home that would be very, very harmful because it's the home. What do you do at home? You're either bathing, you're either washing, maybe doing laundry, cooking, and then the sewage system. So that's on its own. Even for those who are evacuating that and dumping, proper regulation has to be done to ensure they dump at the right place, observing the right protocols or procedures in ensuring that happens, so it doesn't contaminate other areas that comes back to us as being harmful. And then for industrial disposal, proper monitoring should also be done to ensure that they are not dumped into water bodies, as we find in some cases, and then it becomes a problem for the water body itself and the organisms or the life in that particular water body. But to make this happen, it's going to take a lot, because there may be laws, but if there's no proper monitoring to happen to enforce it, then it's just a law. People know, oh, you can't dump, because already there are laws guarding these things, but the enforcement of the law is the problem. And even the education of some persons who handle these things is another problem, because some people feel like, oh, if it's an empty area, we have landfills, then you can dump almost anything in the landfill. And then some would tell you, oh, maybe some pit has been dug where you can just dump some of these things. But little do they know that if it's not well managed, it seeps into the soil as well, and it also becomes a serious problem, because you have boreholes being dug here and there. Some people even drill boreholes without even knowing what has happened around that particular area.
Okay. Another thing most people don't understand is this. Let's talk about our household. For your small family, we need to be careful the water we drink. Waterborne diseases are easily contacted. Now, if you're able to handle it in that small family, good. But if it turns to a community issue, it turns an epidemic. Let me give you an example. Some years back, in Niger State to be precise, there was an outbreak of gastroenteritis. In a space of 2 days, over 100,000 people were hospitalized. More than 20,000 died. What happened? Just water contamination. And the sad part is, when it breaks, most people really don't understand where it's coming from. So this person might be stooling and vomiting. You are trying to assist because you are human. It's family. You get it. The next person is trying to assist. Down to health professionals. So we need to avoid, we need to try our possible best to make sure that we follow due protocol when it comes to disposal of waste and also treatment of our waters, both waste waters and used waters. Also look at birth defaults.
Yes, because of the contamination that has happened, and because we do not also have proper data collection. So sometimes these things go unreported or happen unreported, and so proper attention are not given to them. Imagine areas where their water sources have been contaminated, their lands have been contaminated from improper disposal of industrial waste.
Or mining.
Or even mining activities, because of the kind of chemicals, the kind of poisonous substances that are used in these processes. And so in one way or the other, either the land be contaminated, crops planted on that land taken from the contamination, or even water from that environment being contaminated, people drink them. Because sometimes the effect of these things do not show up quickly.
It might not even show in a generation.
It may not even show, because it may not even show in a generation, like you said. And so you begin to observe that in a particular area over the years, a kind of birth defect is common. Maybe DNAs are even altered because of long-term contamination, and how the people have lived with this contamination unattended or not even knowing that they've been contaminated in one form or the other with the activities with improper waste management. So it's a very critical issue. It's one that has to be looked into. We have the Ministry of Environment. How much of awareness is going on? How much of awareness do the waste managers have? How much of knowledge, training do they have? Around cities, you find private waste managers. Are they trained on proper handling of waste? In the assignment of or the landfills that are separated and say, okay, you can dump waste here, is the place arranged or designed in a way that there is segmentation? You know that liquid waste, for instance, can be dumped here. You know that solid waste, this is where it is dumped. And this is how you protect them. Because even the stench that comes from such areas is even terrible. So if the place smells that much, imagine the amount of pollution that it is given to the environment. It is important that our health workers also begin to do enlightenment to people in those areas how they can protect themselves from getting into contact with some contaminants. These are some of the issues that government needs to handle through the Ministry of Environment, through the Ministry of Health. And even before you certify a private company as a waste manager, it must be certain that they have the ability to manage waste. And companies where liquid waste comes from the use of chemicals and others, must be monitored very well to ensure that they do not just dispose their waste indiscriminately. Where it is found to happen, then proper sanctions should be meted out to ensure that it serves as a deterrent for further practice.
Yes, we do have health service workers, social health service workers. Till now, we do have them, but most of them report to the local government offices or the health centers within these local government offices. Before, we used to have them go into communities and educate people. They tell you do's and don'ts, be it around water, be it around sanitation, and they also penalize. If they get into an environment and they see that this place is dirty, or that they see that there are some contaminants being generated from this place, they penalize the community or they penalize the household. But right now we don't have that, but they are still present. I think the government needs to, we need to bring these particular services back and enforce that our communities stay healthy, because we can't afford to keep wasting funds and money on health expenses that are quite and very well avoidable. We have our guest, Peter Bassi. He is the founder and CEO of PIB Global Services, and he will be joining us to discuss waste management and sanitation. Sir, are you there? Hello, Peter Bassi, are you there? Can you hear me? Hello, Peter, can you unmute your mic? Done?
Hello, good morning.
Good morning, Peter. You're welcome.
Yeah,
how are you doing today? Hello, Peter. How are you doing? Let me hear you.
I just hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you. Yes, we'll go right into it. Our time is fast spent. We're looking at wastewater management and pollution control. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter. Now, let's go straight into this. How much of a control or monitoring do you see or observe from the government quarters on practitioners or PSP agencies?
Sorry, please, can you come again?
Hello? Unmute your mic, Peter. I was asking how much of a control or monitoring do we have on PSPs or waste managers from the government side?
That the government is doing very much, putting a lot of efforts to monitor the waste management system. But, you know, at the end of the day, everything boils back to individuals, people who are the first polluters, people who consume and are the first people to pollute the environment. So there should be a way that government should have a way of changing the behaviors of people, so that if you know that you generate waste, you shouldn't be told, or you shouldn't be monitored, or you shouldn't be policed to know that you have to segregate your waste. You have to properly manage your waste from the point of source, from the source of pollution. So we should be able to let people know that right from where you make the waste, that is where you are should be able to manage the waste properly.
Thank you. You were talking about managing waste from the side of the producer of the waste. Now, we want to ask, if I guess you're somewhere here in Lagos, if it's PIB, I think I've seen your trucks. If you go around Lekki, if you go that Lekki axis of it, you see a whole lot of waste trucks parked on the road. And that's kind of on itself constitutes some dangerous habits. How do you deal with your members or your agency people about this?
Of some of these companies, the waste management is a very expensive process, and it requires some expensive and sophisticated machineries. But some people don't really have it in mind to invest a lot of money in it. So what happens is that they go for substandard equipment that are not, some of the vehicles are outdated vehicles, obsolete vehicles that are not roadworthy. They are not even worthy to be used for that magnitude of work. So that is why most time you see them break down on the roadsides, and it's causing more pollution, more harm, because most of the times when they break down having the waste inside them, and they'll be there for some days. So I think the best way to do is that there should be a kind of more investments into this kind of work. The fact that you are packing waste, the fact that you are packing dustbin doesn't mean you should use dustbin to pack dustbin. The fact that you are converting waste from one point to the other doesn't mean that the machineries, the items, the equipment you are using to convert this waste should be by themselves waste. You can't use waste to pack waste. You can't use obsolete machineries that are outdated to say that you are packing or you are managing waste. So that is what I think should be done.
Kinds of waste. We have liquid waste, we have solid waste, we have waste from households, we have waste from industries. And we find that in some cases, some people channel their waste into public drains. Now, this is a practice too that we also find some eateries, fast food joints do. They connect the pipe from their waste, from their sewage system directly into public drains. So when you go through such areas, it's the kind of smell that comes from such places is really, really appalling. What should be the way to handle waste from different places, from the households, from the industries, from every corner, and the kind of waste too? Do we have enough dump sites to accommodate them? Are the dump sites designed in a way that when waste are dumped there, they do not become a source of pollution to the soil, to the environment around, and even to the water bodies around them?
Okay, so I tell you what, where we are in Badere, where we clean up the water bodies, removing the waste, the water hyacinth and stuff like that. So one of the days I was just inspecting the work that we are doing, cleaning up the water bodies. I was just by the one of the ferry terminals there inspecting. So I saw a woman. This woman is working as a cleaner in one of the restaurants, one of the bars around the water body. So I was watching her. She would sweep the place, and practically she was throwing everything from there inside the water. The plastic bottles, the plastic cups, all the dirt that she recovered from the bar that she was sweeping as a cleaner, she put all the waste inside the water. And to me, I was quite sad. So I had to shout at her that she should not do that again. Then she now said she's sorry that she should not do it. Funny enough, about a week later, I caught her again doing the same thing. So that means she has been doing it every day. Even before I caught her, she has been doing it. And even after I caught her and I warned her, she was still doing it until I caught her again the second time. So I had to go there to meet the management of the place. And I warned them that what they are doing, they are going to report them, and that's going to close down that place. So that's what I said. Everything individuals, everything starts with who they are. You know, proper management should start from the source of the waste generation. People should know that they drink bottled water or sachet water. They should know that they shouldn't be told. They should know that you are not supposed to fling those things inside the gutter. Some people even go as far as putting their hands inside the gutter to ensure that the water, the pure water sachet or the bottled water has really gone into the water, into the gutter. So some people will sweep from their houses and they sweep direct into the gutters. These are crime against the environment and even to humanity. You understand? So there should be more education, house-to-house education in local languages. Use demonstrations, illustrations that people would understand. For us in PIB, we are also happy to partner with some schools. We are happy to partner with schools to train children on this basic waste management skills. So this will help us to, this concept of catching the beyond, this will help us to train children. Apart from as they are kids, they should know how to manage waste so that when they grow up, it will not be a hard thing for them. So I believe these behavioral changes.
I got what you were saying. There is a need for people, Nigerians, to change their behavior towards waste management. Manage your waste properly and ensure that you engage the services of a qualified waste manager to help dispose of your waste. That is the message that Peter was trying to send. Again, thank you, Peter. Let's go on a quick break and look at commercializing water. How can indigenous languages be promoted in a country like this?
Statistics show that less than 10% of Nigeria, the population of Nigeria, has have access to health insurance. You imagine if our population is about 200 million. And
this is Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
All right, what a way to wrap it up. We've looked at access to drinking water. We've looked at supply and distribution of water, and we've looked at wastewater management. Now let's look at commercialization of water. Now, in the absence of central water supply in the regions, private businesses have gotten into providing water for households and even for industries. How is that going? Let's talk to Henry Erimyohai, who is the CEO at Dima Waters Food and Beverages. Good morning. Henry, welcome to the show. Please unmute yourself. You're muted.
Good morning, viewers.
Welcome to the show. So it's glad to have you on today's show. We're looking at commercialization of water. Like I said, in the absence of a central water supply channel or distribution water system, we now have private individuals, businesses supplying drinking water for people in the form of bottled or sachet water. First, let's know where these water that we see in packaged forms come from. What are the sources of these waters?
Okay. Good morning, viewer, once again. Good morning, Eche. Nice seeing you after a very long time. The sources of water actually come from the earth. They are used by technical means. We are able to bring the water to surface, then get it to surface tank, and it goes through some filtration and chemical treatment. Then they are bottled, packaged, and it's good to go for human consumption. Actually, it comes from the aquifer. That is where the water comes from. But the water is not served as received. It has to go through some filtration, some treatment level, and make it meet the acceptable standard for human consumption. So that's the source of the water that is packaged.
Okay, so what is the demand for this packaged water like currently?
The demand is much. It's much because government has failed in their responsibility in making potable water available. I remember when we were growing up, we hardly had water at home. We have just 18 pots that will put water. When you are coming from school, you just stop by, feed yourself, drink water, wash your head. But now we hardly can find public water supply. So people have resorted to getting this water. But because the water we get in our homes that are gotten through boreholes, they do not meet the acceptable standard for consumption, then we have to engage ourselves in getting this water to go through some form of purification, like I said earlier on. And because people believe in it, because of avoid of water pollution, waterborne diseases, talk about cholera, diarrhea, that could be as a result of the consumption of unclean and unwholesome water. So people resort to taking this packaged water that we popularly refer to as pure water, and in some cases, bottled water.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Henry. Now, let's look at those in the rural areas. Let's look at those way beyond the poverty line. How can the private sector, your sector where you play, how can we get them and cover them, or even if it's CSR, or even if it's something that they can afford? Because they have always depended on either a water body somewhere or depending on government provision. But right now, government provision is out of it. So how can the private sector help this particular set of Nigerians?
I think this, to a very large extent, the individuals have been doing, private investors have been doing. There's hardly any hamlet, no matter how far it is from the city center, that do not have an experience of this sachet water. So that is where the bulk of the problems come to the service providers, because no matter how remote, somebody must make sure that this water gets there. And it is done at a homogeneous cost to get it to the end users. So no matter how, water must get to the remotest community.
Let's look at the trend in the water business. We're now having different kind of minerals added to water. You have now the alkaline water and some other types of water. What is the purpose of this? And how is that segment faring?
You see, because of the sedative kind of life that we are living, ordinarily, we really don't need to classify this water. But because of the type of life, the type of activities we are involved in, and the type of food we inject into our system, then people tend to categorize the type of water that will be good to help the body system to build up to what it actually needs. Otherwise, all we just really need in our water is to ensure that you build up the pH. The pH normally should be at 0%. If you can have it at 0, it's not alkaline, then it's not acidic, then in that case it's good. But some people now prefer that, okay, there should be a little bit of alkaline in the water you take. Like I said, because of our lifestyle, the food, the type of food we live with, all these seasonals that we have in your food, they tend to do some damage to our body. Then you now want to correct it with the type of water that you take. I think that is actually what is bringing its dichotomy in this type of water that we want to inject into our system.
As we wrap up, you just mentioned that demand for bottled and sachet water is very high. But what is the challenge that those in your sector currently face? How can your capacity be enhanced to ensure that you meet the growing demand for water?
Most of the major problem we have in the industry is capacity. Capacity to meet up your demand, capacity to expand, capacity to have your distribution vehicle. Because in this business, your production is not complete until it gets to the end user on the value chain. So this business is capital intensive, and we are calling for government support. We are calling for financial support from this financial institution. But regrettably, because of the high interest rate, people are finding it difficult to come into the business and be able to break even. The cost of production is high, the cost of distribution is high, maintaining your vehicle is high, spare parts are no longer genuine. Almost every day you find yourself at the workshop trying to fix one thing or the other in your vehicle. So, and you just have to get these goods, this product to the end user. So it's not been easy doing this business, but we have entered. There's nothing we can do. We can just believe that the best can happen someday.
As a practitioner in this particular space, what do you have to say when you get into a supermarket or get some of these superstores and you see water imported from the abroad? What goes through your mind? Okay. Our guest is gone, and I really wanted him to talk about some of these our luxuries, because that's what I call them.
Maybe it's also the thinking of some persons that what we call pure water may not actually be pure, which means that NAFDAC needs to do a whole lot to ensure that brands that are having the NAFDAC registration number actually do have them, and from time to time they do some form of monitoring to ensure that the end users are protected, as much as people want to take advantage of the commercialized water, because people need to drink water. Where the water corporations or the public water system is not working, then people will need to get water from the commercial water distributors or suppliers. And that's our show today. Thank you for watching. I am Blessing AHA. Business Insight will come up shortly on Silk News. Do stay with us.
Thank you very much. Do have a beautiful day.